Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, May the 8th, 2024. So we've just had this attempted launch of this rocket. I think it's by Boeing. Is it the Starliner? And it has been delayed. There was something wrong, and apparently the next launch isn't going to be probably until the weekend. So I thought I would quickly look at the astrology of the launch of the Starliner. What was happening at the time of this aborted launch. I think they call it a scrub. At least I think is that whoever's involved in launching it have said that the launch was scrubbed, and there may not be another launch perhaps until Friday. Maybe the news has changed, but Friday at the very earliest. So I did want to consider what would happen if the Starliner were to be launched on Friday. Well, I'm sure things are fine, but I think one can still look at the astrology at the end of a week and wonder, is that really a time to be considering launching a rocket with Mars 45-degree aspect from Uranus? That does seem unwise. So that's something I'll be considering. Another thing I want to consider, and I know this sounds really boring, or it might sound boring at first sight, but I think it illustrates some technical points. But yes, I was asked about Prince Harry's North Node, and Prince Harry has his North Node at around 29 degrees Taurus. So at 29 degrees Taurus, we have this star known as Alcyone. Just to say what Alcyone, by the way, is. I probably haven't pronounced that right, but Alcyone is connected to the Pleiades or Atlantides, were the seven daughters of Atlas and Pleione, six of whom are described as visible, and one is invisible or lost. And they were the virgin companions of Diana. By the way, this is Vivian E. Robeson. They were the virgin companions of Diana and were translated into heaven in order to escape the importunities of Orion, or according to another account, because of their grief at the fate of their father Atlas, who was condemned to support the weight of the heavens on his head and hands. So I think that's something to consider. Harry's North Node, conjunct Alcyone. I was asked about it, and I looked at it from a technical perspective. And there is some really interesting stuff going on with Harry's North Node. Or rather, there was some stuff going on with Harry's North Node relating to the death of his mother, which I don't think I fully covered, and in terms of how really important it actually was. And while I'm on the subject of Harry and Diana, I wanted also to consider the possibility that time goes in two directions. So we know that Diana died on August the 31st, 1997. But you could also argue that she died on May the 2nd, 1925. But I'll be getting into that later in the video, after I've covered the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, Wednesday, May the 8th, 2024, set for mid-noon in New York. Top right, that's a picture of Starliner, and there, of course, is our friends Diana and Harry. Again, I really apologize for being boring about continuing on the theme of Harry later in this video, but it's not really about Harry. It's about looking at particular astrological techniques and trying to get us to think about how we might view time and the possibility that time actually goes backwards as well as forwards. And so obviously the main theme today is the new moon. Now, this new moon was at when is it, the new moon? It's at 4:22 a.m. London time. That actually means that the new moon was last night if you were in the Americas. So this new moon was at around 18 Taurus. So by definition, that means that we've got the sun and the moon in the same place. And I think it's good that we've got a new moon. It's the beginning of a new cycle. The moon is now waxing. So traditionally, the moon is fortunate when it's waxing and it's unfortunate when it's waning. The waxing moon is about things that are good, that are positive, that are life-affirming. The waning moon is more connected with the dark side. Things connected with malice. So now that the moon is waxing, for many of us, we might see it as a time when we can start getting things off the ground, when we can perhaps start getting to work on new projects. I think that could be something we might want to think about. Not necessarily exactly now at the time of a new moon, because the actual day of a new moon is a time when things are quite secret. You can't see the moon. Things that are going to be really successful have to start in the darkness. It's like a seed, isn't it? You don't take a seed and leave it in the sunlight if you want it to germinate. You have to sort of bury it several inches or more under earth to give it a chance to develop in the darkness. I suppose that's the same with life. Life in general develops in the darkness before it's born. But with this new moon, I think we're going to feel a sense of stability. And if things are unstable, we are going to want to stabilize them. And at the same time, this new moon is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And I've mentioned this before, and I think it is very fortunate. And today, the sun, by definition almost, is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And so I think for many of us, it's actually going to be quite a fortunate day. Things are going to start to work because, the moon is applying to a conjunction of Jupiter. Moon-Jupiter conjunction is really good. It means that things can happen, and if we apply ourselves to something, there is an excellent chance that it can work out. Though we can't expect everything to run to plan. After all, the moon is also making a conjunction to Uranus. So moon conjunct Uranus, there can be a little bit of stubbornness and being very persistent in our activities, in particular types of activities, and not really caring too much about how much instability they cause. So we don't want to spoil things by being too stubborn. What matters is us being as successful as we can be. And that doesn't mean getting obsessed about points of principle. A bit of change can be required. And one of the problems with Moon in Taurus, as I discussed yesterday, is that Moon in Taurus can be a little bit stuck in particular emotional states. So once Moon in Taurus gets into an emotional state, it can find it difficult to get out. And that can also apply to relationships. So if Moon in Taurus has made a decision about someone, they may want to just hold on to that emotional decision. I use the example of Emmanuel Macron yesterday with his Moon in Taurus. So as a teenager, he made a decision that he was crazy about his drama teacher. And now, however many decades later, he's married to her and she's not going away. So that's an exaggerated approach to having Moon in Taurus. But we just need to be aware of that. We don't want to hold on to things too tightly, because if we do hold on to things too tightly, we may be able to prevent ourselves from benefiting from some of the good luck that is just around the corner. As far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, here it is. There is it. There's today from a heliocentric perspective. As you can see, Mars is still trundling towards that conjunction to Saturn. I don't think that we're going to be feeling this conjunction yet, but it's just, if you like, a note for the diary. I should be able to tell you when that conjunction actually is, but I haven't got it together to work it out when, but I'll try and tell you tomorrow in my next video. Venus is still square Pluto. So with Venus square Pluto, there can be a little bit of obsession. Remember, this is heliocentric Venus square Pluto. Can be a little bit of interpersonal obsession, getting obsessed with someone for good and bad reasons. And I suppose that ties in perhaps with geocentric Moon conjunct Jupiter. And there's the Earth starting to make oppositions to Uranus and Jupiter. In other words, that's the same thing as the Sun starting to make conjunctions to Uranus and Jupiter, but we are not quite there yet. So in terms of a heliocentric picture, there's not a great deal happening, though we do have some warnings there in terms of the Earth starting to make the opposition to Jupiter and Uranus, plus Mars starting to make the conjunction to Saturn. So I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Wednesday, May the 8th, 2024, for the 12 signs. Aries. Aries, you are quite stubborn today. I think that you have decided that certain things really are important and need your time and effort. In fact, Aries, I would have said perhaps that you are uncharacteristically stubborn. You have decided that certain material details are important and you're not going to compromise. Maybe, Aries, you've decided it's a matter of principle. Certain things have to be fought and argued over, and you're not going to let go now. I'm not going to say that your approach is wrong, because if you are persistent and if you can maintain high energy, then with the Moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, I think you might actually have a bit of success there. And I'm thinking particularly success in a financial sense. So if you've got some financial aim that you're trying to achieve, and it's obviously a realistic aim. I mean, you can't work hard towards winning the lottery, but if it's a realistic aim, then I think there is an excellent chance that you can achieve it, and in the process really stabilize your overall situation. And this all ties in with the new moon. So today, or perhaps late last night, there was a new moon, and this new moon, for many Arians, may represent a new tide of affairs in terms of money. Your attitude to money is perhaps changing. Maybe you've taken a view that in the past you'd been maybe a little too irresponsible, or you had just been thinking about other stuff and you really couldn't be bothered. And now you're thinking, well, yes, there are things you can do, and you need to safeguard what you own and what you might own in the future. So if you want things in the future, you perhaps take the view that you've got to take action now in order to get those things. And this new moon is in Taurus, so it's very persistent. So it's a time when you can persistently move towards the achievement of your goals, particularly your material goals. And in the process, you can surprise people. People might not be aware of how concerned you are, because Aries is usually a sign that isn't too bothered about money. I mean, you take the view that life is for living, but sometimes, like not just today, but perhaps over the next couple of weeks, you have to stop and consider your financial needs, because I think they are important. Though there is no need to be obsessed about money. What you have to do is just take the view that, yes, it does matter. It's part of what it is to be alive, but it's not the whole story. And I think some Arians, and hopefully most Arians, will be able to compartmentalize their finances and say, yes, this is one part of your life that needs some care and attention, but it's not the whole story. And if you can start to see the bigger picture, where money is in terms of your overall being, and perhaps taking the view that you should not confuse what is important from a sort of spiritual and philosophical sense, and not confuse it with the financial realm, and just keep the two separate, you may be able to transcend to some extent and get a broader perspective, and find that you can actually put your energy into getting this broader perspective, but at the same time never forgetting the financial dimension. So I understand that is a somewhat difficult balance to get, but I think it's a balance that actually can be achieved. Now, one point about relationships, you may find that those close to you are in a somewhat negative frame of mind, it seems. There seems to be something really bothering them, and they could end up making things just difficult because of their negativity. Now, as an Aries, you don't really like to, hang around on one thing, on one problem, and you do find it perhaps irritating when other people get obsessed. And that is something that really could happen. And so you need to think about the energy that some of the people in your life are giving off. Are they being just negative for the sake of it? Are they just seeing the world in the worst possible light? Or is there some genuine concern? So you have to work out what is the right way to respond. It may be some people need some help. Let's not forget that Mercury is still conjunct Chiron in Aries. I said yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, the last couple of days, with Mercury conjunct Chiron in Aries. Aries, you can really help people by saying the right words. But some people don't want to hear. It doesn't matter what you say, they're still going to be negative. In fact, if you try to be nice, they might blame you for being nice. So when you're dealing with people with a negative attitude, ask yourself whether or not you can constructively intervene. In many cases, you can constructively intervene, but in some cases, you just need to let people stew. If they want to be negative and they're not contributing anything positive and they're not prepared to make the effort, then you may have no choice but to leave them to their own devices. Taurus, there is a new moon. This new moon might have been last night if you're in the Americas, but it's still very much with us, regardless of where you are. It's a new moon day, and with this new moon in Taurus, I think there's no reason why it can't be tremendously positive, because this new moon is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. Jupiter is a greater benefic, and Venus is a lesser benefic. So I think that it is a fortunate new moon, and if you're a Taurus, it can represent a brand new beginning. In fact, it really has to be a brand new beginning. Just a reminder that Jupiter has been moving through your sign since last May for a year, and Jupiter is about to leave Taurus. And when Jupiter leaves Taurus, that may be about an opportunity leaving you. I mean, a time of opportunity may be about to end. And if you haven't grasped this opportunity, or at least started to take advantage of it by the time Jupiter leaves Taurus, which it's getting really close. Sorry, just let me be precise. Jupiter leaves Taurus on, depending on your time zone, the 25th or the 26th of May. So, okay, you've got 2 or 3 weeks left, but it's close. And this new moon is going to be the last new moon in Taurus for 12 years, where Jupiter is also in Taurus. So this new moon better be a new beginning for you. If you haven't taken advantage of an opportunity that's just been sitting there, perhaps for as long as a year now, then you might not get another chance. So that might be something that you need to sort out. And yes, there might be a little bit of hurry. Though today, on the actual day of a new moon, I'm not saying there's anything you necessarily have to do, though we shouldn't forget that the moon is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. And so that puts a big emphasis on Jupiter and all the good things it can do for you. So if there's something you've been meaning to do and you've been postponing it, then now might be the time to get it off the ground. And it's going to be very important, Taurus, that you are positive, because right now there is some danger that some Taurians have a rather negative view of the world. You might not be able to get out of this negative view of the world. You may take the view that there's no point, that the obstacles in front of you are so great that you can't get past them. Now, I think in most cases that is something going on in your head. I don't think those obstacles are real, and even if they are real, I don't think the supposed impenetrability of them is real. So if there are obstacles, you can certainly get past them, not least with this new moon, which is conjunct Jupiter, and also the moon is conjunct Uranus. That gives you a chance, I think, to take dramatic measures to overcome obstacles. So it's really important, Taurus, that you have a positive approach, because so much of it is about psychology. And if you have a negative approach now, when maybe time is of the essence, you could lose time. So that could be a problem. But maybe you can transfer and transform this negative approach. How do you turn a negative approach, a belief that nothing is going to work, into something positive? Well, I think what you do is you turn it into something grinding. grindingly moving towards your goal. You don't actually think you're going to achieve it, but you still grind towards it. You're just going to do it. Come what may, you're going to get there. This is your hill. This is the hill you've decided to really throw everything into overcoming. And it could be hard work, could be grindingly hard work, if that's the way you want to be. But keep going, Taurus, with all the stubbornness of that of your sign. And I think that in the end, you will achieve what you're looking for, or you'll achieve your goals. But it doesn't need to be totally hard work. Okay, it can be hard work, but I don't think it needs to be miserable hard work. I think having a positive state of mind, while not strictly speaking compulsory, would make things, I think, a lot easier. And just a reminder that Venus, which is your ruler, continues to be square Pluto from a heliocentric perspective. So yesterday Venus was square Pluto heliocentrically. Today it's square Pluto heliocentrically. So with that heliocentric square between Venus and Pluto, Taurus, you may have a certain obsessive quality today. You expect things to turn out in a particular way, and perhaps you expect other people to behave in a particular way. I think you maybe need to let go of that a little bit, but at least, Taurus, you're reliable. And that's a big thing. And I think that today's new moon is going to emphasize that reliability. And if you can also be positive outwardly, and I won't say have a smile on your face, but at least not have a frown upon your face, then I think that people will pick up on that and they'll help you to achieve your aims, whatever they might be. Gemini. Gemini, you do have some rather unusual thoughts. I mean, I suppose in some ways this is the nature of being a Gemini. And I'm saying this as a Gemini. As a Gemini, I'm just so relieved that no one knows what I'm thinking, because if people really knew what I was thinking, I think I'd be a complete outcast. Because Geminis can have some really horrible thoughts, and horrible thoughts can be quite distressing. And I think that today some of your thoughts may be really a little bit disturbing. I think that it's something that you shouldn't necessarily take personally. I think that actually what's happening today, Gemini, is that you're probably picking up on the world in which you're living. And I know that Geminis sometimes have a reputation for being insensitive, but I think that's an unfair reputation. I think you do have a high degree of sensitivity, and particularly today. And what you are picking up on at the moment is some of the things going on in the world which are basically not so nice. And some of you might just feel almost ashamed of having these unusual thoughts, disturbing thoughts. But, it's okay. You shouldn't obsess about these thoughts, but you should perhaps look at these thoughts and say, well, yeah, this is the way the world is. And I think that the new moon today is actually going to make this even stronger, because the new moon is in Taurus. And so because it's in Taurus, from a Gemini perspective, Taurus is quite an introspective sign. So there's stuff going on behind the scenes in the Gemini world, stuff that you don't want to discuss, stuff which can lead to something very useful later on, but just perhaps not today. You're thinking things through, Your feelings are stronger than usual, and yeah, there is a lot that you don't want to discuss. Maybe it's because it's of a secretive nature and you don't want people to take advantage of you giving away your secrets, but also stuff you don't want to discuss because you're afraid that you might get a negative response. And probably that's the way it should be. Though I should say that if you are an American Gemini, the picture is somewhat different, because late in the day, the moon does actually change sign. It moves from Taurus to Gemini. I think, to be precise, I make it that the moon moves into Gemini if you're on the East Coast, for example in New York. Moon moves into Gemini at 7:20 p.m. If you're on the West Coast, for example Los Angeles, it will move into Gemini at 4:20 p.m. So if you're in the Americas, late morning, early afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, you're going to feel a change as the moon moves into your sign. And you're going to feel less obsessive and perhaps more positive, and you'll think, finally, you can start getting things off the ground. And I don't know what you're doing late in the day, but you might have an opportunity to sort of come out of your shell and start to make things happen. And I think you'll be less focused on your own private world. Now, if you're not in the Americas, don't worry. Moon goes into Gemini tomorrow, so it's not that you've missed out. It just you get this all a few hours later, or I suppose almost a day later if you're in Australia and New Zealand. So really, that's a picture for Gemini. Just don't be too concerned about your own private thoughts. They're not a reflection on you. They are more of a reflection on the society in which you live. Cancer. Well, the new moon is here. New moons are important for Cancerians. Okay, I understand that new moon might have been last night if you were in the Americas, but today has a very much a new moon feel to it, and it's a time when Cancerians can get things off the ground. They can start, I think, creating a certain amount of stability. After all, Cancer, the moon is in Taurus, and the moon is exalted in Taurus, and the moon is your ruler. And so that's got to be good for Cancerians, hasn't it? You have a growing sense of inner stability, and this is an inner stability that people pick up on. When people are around you, they feel comfortable. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to just fit in with everyone else's expectations, not at all. I mean, after all, the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. So in your own quiet way, you can start to really shake things up a bit. Perhaps some people are being complacent and they've made some assumptions, and you just need to explain to them, no, those assumptions may be incorrect. I say explain to them, that's probably the wrong word, because Taurus is an earth sign. It's maybe you need to demonstrate that someone has got their assumptions wrong through your actions. But we're not talking about anything completely dramatic, out of control. You are very much in control today, Cancer. And the moon is also making a conjunction to Jupiter. And the moon conjunct Jupiter is, one of the most fortunate planets in the book. So the moon is your ruler. It's conjunct the planet of good fortune. So you can expect things to work out. And it can work out on many different levels. It can certainly work out in your social life in terms of benefiting from people you meet, from your friends, from colleagues, from associates. You can really gain from them, but gain from them not in a way that is unpleasant. It's maybe everyone can benefit, and so Cancer, really do take advantage of that. Though it is possible, and I know I've been very positive really about Cancer, it is possible, Cancer, that you may be able to benefit from someone else's misfortune, or not necessarily someone else's misfortune, from perhaps an organization's misfortune. Someone's got a problem, something has got a problem, something's not going right, and you're there to sort it out. You're there to respond to this situation. Remember, it's not about you. It's not about anything bad going on in your life. It's something difficult going on in someone else's life or in the life of some organization. And it does seem there may be a chance to benefit from that. The reason is quite clear. It's because although this moon conjunct Jupiter is pretty fortunate, it is conjunct Algol. And Algol is a fixed star connected with decapitation, bad things, disaster. Remember, it's Ras Al Ghul, which is the head of the demon. But don't worry about it. I think you're going to be okay with this. Actually, I think you can benefit from it. Though, in terms of other people, there is some chance that there's a bit of jealousy flying around today, and people aren't really showing it, but I think there are a few people who are actually jealous of you. You've perhaps got something that they would like, or perhaps you have a calmness and an ease that other people, they'd like to have a part of it, but they can't have a part of it. So when considering people's motives, and if someone is behaving in a slightly difficult way, and they're not being as cooperative and helpful as you'd like, consider the possibility that they're jealous of you. But it's just a thought. I mean, don't worry about it too much, because overall, I think it looks like being a really good day. Could be a new beginning. And, Moon is conjunct Jupiter. Moon is your ruler. Jupiter's a planet of good fortune. So regardless of this Moon-Jupiter conjunction as being on a fixed star Algol, I think it can be very fortunate for you. Leo, the Sun is your ruler, and the Sun is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So with the Sun on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, I'm very optimistic about the prospects for Leos today. It just does look like being a day when things can really work for you. But we do have to unpack what that Venus-Jupiter is really all about. So Venus is the lesser benefic, and Jupiter is the greater benefic. So Venus and Jupiter are the two lucky planets, and they are together. And so you might say, well, Sun conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, that just gives you automatic luck. But what does that mean? Does that mean that you can be complacent, that you can just assume that everything's going to come your way? Well, not really, no. As I think I might have said yesterday, if you assume that, well, the universe doesn't like that, and complacency tends not to be rewarded. And so if you are lucky, and I think you are lucky today with Sun on a Venus-Jupiter midpoint, you've actually got to do something to make that luck happen. And so that means, I think, really pushing yourself, working as hard as you can. After all, the sun is in Taurus. The sun is in an earth sign. From a Leo view, Taurus is about putting in the effort. It's about making a real effort to make things happen in the real world, and perhaps in terms of work and career and business. It doesn't have to be. Whatever's important to you, put in the effort. And if you put in the effort, then that Venus and Jupiter is going to come together really nicely. On the other hand, if you do nothing and you expect everything to be given to you just like that, then a Sun on a Venus-Jupiter midpoint could actually feel a bit disappointing. You might feel that there's opportunity all around you, but you just don't get it. But that needn't happen. I think it's just so important, Leo, that you are positive and you are optimistic, yes, but you also must put in the work with that Sun on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And with that Sun on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, that's what people are going to pick up. You know, Leo has a reputation for being a sort of a sunny sign, isn't it? A sun ruler of Leo. And I think that people were going to pick up on that sunniness of Leo. So make sure that you're seen and heard. You know, people are going to feel good when they're around you. And it's not that you have to say anything. It's just about the energy that you are radiating. So perhaps you can put yourself at the center of your little solar system and radiate good vibes. Of course, it's not, as I said, it's not just enough to just sit there and radiate. That's not enough. You have to actually put in the work. I'm sorry to be boring about that, but that is going to be really important. But if you can do that, I think that things should actually work out very well. But at the same time, try to have a little bit of flexibility, because today, yes, there is a new moon, or it was last night if you're in the Americas, but because of this new moon, you might be attracting an event that perhaps you weren't expecting. After all, the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. And so something might happen that you weren't planning on. And at first sight, you might panic, but you had not prepared for this. So a little bit of flexibility would be useful, because Leo is a fixed sign. And you've got a lot of stuff going on in Taurus, which is a fixed sign. And so when the fixed signs have to deal with something they weren't expecting, they weren't planning on, it can mess them up. So if something happens that you haven't planned for, don't panic. If you keep your cool, you will be able to work out a solution. In fact, it is probably an opportunity in disguise. Virgo, you are having some somewhat unusual thoughts today, and I think it just may be linked with your sensitivity to just what's happening in society. I think I mentioned this yesterday, that this sensitivity is strong about what's going on in the collective. And I think that this sensitivity does continue. And I think that you're reaching a point where you can actually see not just how difficult things are, but actually how unpleasant things are. You're very sensitive to unpleasantness at the moment. And I must emphasize that I'm not talking about your unpleasantness. I'm talking about society's unpleasantness. You can really feel it, and it might get you down. I mean, after all, Virgo is quite a sensitive sign. It does pick up on its environment very quickly. I mean, it's not just the chemical environment. Remember, Virgos, they can pick up on pollutants, smoke, garbage in the air, garbage in the food, chemicals in the food, all of that kind of thing. So as a Virgo, you are sensitive to that. But it's actually about, I think the phrase is psychic hygiene. Maybe you need good psychic hygiene today, because Virgo, you're picking up on a lot of stuff, and a lot of that stuff is unpleasant and can be a little bit overwhelming. It's not your stuff, it's not your garbage, it's other people's garbage, it's society's garbage, and it's very real. But don't panic. Just have some, as I said, psychic hygiene. Psychic hygiene is, as I understand it, is about having your own boundaries, psychic boundaries. There are all sorts of things you can do to clear the air in a psychic sense, and I'm not going to suggest anything in particular, because I'm not really into all that sort of new age stuff. Not really. I mean, I know I'm doing an astrology channel, but I do have my doubts about some of the new age. As far as I'm concerned, we're very much in the age of Pisces, and the age of Aquarius doesn't start for centuries. That's my view. But still, you know what I mean. There are things you can do, and I think that many Virgos are very aware of what they need to do to clear the air, to clear the bad vibes, and that's something you can do, and something you should try to do, and not allow society's garbage to clog you up. I think that, and particularly now when you're so sensitive to it all. And I'm sorry to start with all that and to be so apparently negative, but I suppose on a positive sense, Virgo, you're starting to perceive the world as it is, and you're starting to see the unpleasantness of the world as it is, and that gives you knowledge. And I suppose it's important to be realistic. And in terms of the new moon, there is a new moon today, or it was last night in the Americas. Depends where you are, but it doesn't matter where you are. It's a new moon day as far as I'm concerned. So this new moon is in really quite a spiritual sector of your chart in Taurus. When one thinks about Taurus and spirituality, one sort of thinks of the earth, the sacred earth. That is what we can touch, and you are very aware of that, of the sacred earth and the sanctity of the environment. I hope, and that perhaps allows you to get a perspective on things. And this new moon, perhaps gives you a broader perspective on your place in things. In your perspective on your place in the grand scheme. That, yes, as a Virgo, you are very concerned about details. Details do matter. Every astrology book says Virgos are into details, but Virgos can also move beyond those details. And I think that with the new moon in Taurus, I really do think that allows you to get beyond the details and to move into something higher and more eternal, because the details are just ephemeral. They're things you have to deal with in terms of short-term existence. Details are temporary. You sort them out, they go away, they're gone. at least they're gone in the sense of causing you problems. But by focusing on something higher, you're looking at the broader picture, and you're looking at the things which don't go away, and which shouldn't go away, and which need to be protected. And that's about your material environment. And I think that, if you are a politically minded Virgo, and you want to do something to make the world a better place with this new moon in Taurus, well, look at the environment. Many Virgos are going to actually perhaps be concerned about the way our environment is being destroyed. And so if you're concerned about that, ask yourself, well, what can you do? Maybe you can act in terms of your immediate self, how you're dealing with your garbage, literal how you're dealing with garbage. Are you producing too much garbage, recycling or whatever? But it can be about something much broader. How do you actually address a world out there which couldn't care less about the environment? And what can you as a Virgo do? Should you be overwhelmed? And this goes back to what I was saying right at the beginning. You are aware of the total unpleasantness of the world in which you're living. And yeah, awareness is a starting point. And now you need to consider what you can actually do. And that depends on your situation. Though, to conclude, just a reminder, there is a conjunction between Moon and Jupiter in Taurus today. And you're a Virgo. Moon and Jupiter, it's an earth sign. And that's a great conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. And it not only allows you to ground yourself, it also allows you to find like-minded people who share your priorities, but who also are not going to let you down. And that's important for every Virgo, finding people that won't let you down, finding people who are reliable. And I think today that is certainly something that you can do. Libra, you mustn't be too negative today. And I think there is some danger, Libra, that you could be negative. You might just look at the world and see it in the worst possible light. And then you have to ask yourself, why might this be the case? I think that you're very sensitive right now to other people, and what other people are doing and what other people are emanating. And you may think that some people are really just hopeless. And in terms of from your own perspective, you may be asking yourself, what is the reason for continuing with a course of action that is essentially doomed to failure? Now, I'm not saying it is doomed to failure, but I'm just saying that right now you might be of a view that something is doomed to failure. I don't think it is doomed to failure. I don't think anything is doomed to failure. But I'm just saying that today, if you're not careful, you might have a certain amount of negativity in this direction. And therefore, it's just important that you work out what this negativity is about. Now, it is possible that some of this negativity is grounded in a little bit of laziness. So let me explain that. You want something to happen. You can see that it's an absolutely huge task. Therefore, you do not want to engage with such a huge task. Why should you? Why would you want to do that? And it's just so much effort that it's effectively impossible. So in that sense, it's lazy. You can see the problem that it is going to need, the problem in front of you. And you're saying, well, why should you want to do that? It's just too much work. And so there is a sense of laziness there. You just can't be bothered to really make the effort. And I'm not saying you're lazy at all. I'm just and perhaps even lazy was the wrong word to use. But perhaps if you want something to happen, if you're really anxious for something to happen, then you do have to really put in the effort. And what you mustn't do is allow your own negativity to have an impact on other people. It's not what people want to hear. And particularly as it's unnecessary. I mean, let's not forget, today there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Moon and Jupiter it's a very positive conjunction. And from your perspective, this conjunction allows you to find some amazing things in some very unusual places. And you're the person that can move into places that other people are avoiding. Now, that is not a typically Libran state of affairs. Typical Libran, or at least textbook Libran, is someone who likes to glide on the surface and just not go too deep into anything. But right now, the successful Libran is actually going below the surface and is able to grapple with things that other people aren't prepared to touch. I mean, I'm talking about complicated things, perhaps of an emotional nature. I'm not talking about shark wrestling or anything like that. But perhaps by grappling with things and being prepared to go below the surface, that allows you to get in touch with the gold. Though maybe that actually explains why you might be feeling a bit negative today, because you are going below the surface. You are seeing things for what they're really like, and perhaps some of the things you're seeing are a little bit disturbing, and you're thinking, yeah, this is just too much, and there's not really much you can do about it. Well, I think, Libra, it's just really very important not to underestimate yourself, because you're actually able to go into places, look, investigate areas that just other people can't touch, and that at least aren't prepared to touch. And I do think that gives you a great advantage. And yes, there is good luck around today. There is, but good luck for Librans is in places that I think that other people aren't going to stray into. That's because of that Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Of course, it's on Algol, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction. A fixed star, Ras Al Ghul, the head of the demon. I mean, it sounds scary, but from your perspective, that's where the gold is. I mean, I suppose in terms of fairy stories and fantasy fiction, where is the gold? The gold is right next to the dragon, or you have to go towards a dragon to get that gold. And again, I'm not telling you to take risks, physical risks. I'm just saying, if it's complicated, that's what, where things are complicated, that's where the opportunity lies. Scorpio. So yesterday I was talking to you, and I was suggesting that other people do need a lot of attention, or rather, you have to be aware of other people and their influence on you. And in a way, I say the same thing today. I mean, after all, there is a new moon in Taurus, and Taurus is your opposite sign. Obviously, I mean, you're a Scorpio, so Taurus is your opposite sign. There's a new moon in Scorpio. So that new moon may represent a new beginning in terms of certain relationships. That might be a brand new relationship, or it could be a relationship that is starting to move in a new direction. I think that that new beginning is by and large going to be constructive, because, this new moon is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. Venus-Jupiter as a pair, they are the two benefics. So this new moon in Taurus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint creates a possibility of a fortunate relationship, meeting people who can do you good in many different ways. It could be about making you happy, giving you romantic satisfaction. It could be about business partnership, someone who has your best interests at heart, a situation where you and someone else can work towards achieving a particular goal. So there are plenty of ways in which other people can make your life better. And in the process, it's important that you're ready to deal with a bit of change, because Scorpio is a fixed sign. It can be very focused on one thing, and it doesn't want to change its routine or have to deal with people who are outside its normal experience. But maybe you have to deal with that things might happen in terms of you and other people that you hadn't planned for, that you don't feel entirely comfortable with. But it may just be that you're dealing with a challenge to your existing view of the world, and perhaps your view of the world has just become a little bit too fixed and actually needs to be shaken up a bit. Sagittarius, I think, if I remember rightly, yesterday I was a little bit negative about what was going on, and that may what I said might not have been what you wanted to hear. So I will try to be a little more positive today. I mean, what's going on today is not so dissimilar from what was going on yesterday. Though yesterday we were in the run-up to a new moon, by and large. Now the new moon has really happened, but it's still very strong. And this new moon is really about creating new order for Sagittarians. Sagittarians can be quite chaotic. It's a mutable sign. It's a fire sign. When Sagittarians, they really enjoy variety, things going all over the place. That's fun. But there does come a point where you need to start to create some order. And really, that's what you need to do. And that's going to be hard work, because I think that many Sagittarians are quite disorganized at the moment. And I think the disorganization perhaps stems from the fact that there is a lot of information coming your way, a lot of really interesting stuff. And you are trying to work with it all. And it's hard. And a lot of the information you're getting is false. It's just inaccurate. And the problem is, it's particularly a problem if you're being told things which hit your natural optimism, because Sagittarius is a naturally optimistic sign. So if you hear about opportunities, that things are fine, that everything's great, you're naturally going to say, oh, that's wonderful. And you might glom onto that, but that's not what you should be doing. If you hear something from outside, or you perceive something, don't take it at face value, because I'm not convinced that people can be trusted. It's not that they're going to deliberately mislead you, although they could, but I think in most cases they're not going to deliberately mislead you. They're just, they're pretty confused themselves. They might come over as being confident, but they're not really confident. So you might just pick up on a lot of information that is frankly garbage, and you don't want to be too strongly influenced by this information. And actually, this is a very good reason for being very self-contained today. You know that certain things need to be done, and really, Sagittarius, you should just go ahead and do them. And it might be boring. You know, you would prefer to be listening to something else. Perhaps you'd prefer to be listening to some YouTube video telling you how wonderful things are. Maybe. Perhaps you prefer to be listening to me. I don't know. You've got things to do. If you've got things that are pressing to do, maybe you shouldn't be listening to me. You should just be doing what needs to be done. And so do that, and then you will slowly start to make sense of things. And I should point out that Jupiter, which is your ruler, is starting to move onto Algol. And Algol is the head of the demon. It's quite a difficult fixed star. It's not there yet, but over the week, Jupiter is moving on to Algol. Now, I'm not telling you to panic, by the way. In fact, it could be that Jupiter moving on to Algol could work in your favour. If you look at, if you look at the textbook, I was looking at Robeson, the fixed stars. He doesn't actually have anything to say about Jupiter conjunct Algol, and the problem there is that Jupiter is a benefic and Algol is quite malefic. So how do you put together a malefic and a benefic? And it's possible that you're able to get involved in something that other people find difficult, that you can deal with it. Because I think today, I know I've said that you're quite chaotic, but you seem to be trying very hard, or you should be trying very hard, to organize yourself and to make sense of chaos. And maybe you're going to be in a position to make sense of someone else's chaos, perhaps. And if you can make sense of someone else's chaos and someone else's difficulties, and maybe even in a commercial sense, that you can actually benefit from it. So that may be one way in which Jupiter conjunct Algol works for you. Where there is a problem, there is perhaps a way for Sagittarius to benefit from it. That's not the same thing as causing the problem. Someone's got to deal with a problem. If someone has, I don't know, if you're a Sagittarian plumber and someone has a burst pipe, clearly you are benefiting from a problem. Let's be really grim about it. If you're a Sagittarian undertaker, like it or not, you're benefiting from people dying. I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean. So Jupiter conjunct Algol could be interesting. And yes, you may be able to benefit from it, but not in a way that anyone gets hurt. Someone's got to sort it out, and perhaps you're the person to sort it out. It depends on your situation, though. Capricorn. You are, I think, today very creative for a number of reasons. One thing to say is that there's a lot going on in Taurus, which is an earth sign. In fact, there's a new moon in Taurus. Okay, maybe the new moon was last night, if you're in the Americas, but there's very much a new moon in Taurus. It is a fellow earth sign, and from a Capricorn perspective, it's a sign that is very much very much connected with creativity. So New Moon in Taurus represents a time when Capricorns can reimagine their creativity. So if there's something you've really been wanting to do, which is quite personal, doesn't involve other people, now is certainly a time that you can do it. And you can really do it in a way that's very grounded. And if that creativity is of an earthy nature, involves, getting your hands dirty, that would be maybe dealing with the soil, planting things, for example, or it could be about making something. Taurus, it's a physical sign. It's not so much about vagueness, like I don't know, reciting poetry. It's more about creating something that is right there. So if you are a Capricorn gardener or sculptor, or you're carving things, then you can really do a good job, and you can create something that is earthy but really very beautiful. And at the same time, you do have a natural affinity with your own inner talents. Your own talents are really clear. They're clear to you, and I understand, Capricorn, that you're often, you're quite modest, all things being equal. Capricorns are not given for boasting or demanding attention, and when they look at their own abilities, they can be quite down to earth and realistic about them, and that's nice. But there can come a time, Capricorn, when you underestimate yourself. And I think right now it is very important that you don't underestimate yourself, because you really have got something to contribute that is of perhaps artistic merit, as I've already suggested with this creativity, but it can also be about, for example, business talent. Capricorn is an earth sign. The stereotypical Capricorn is good when it comes to business and finance. That's not always the case. It's a bit of a stereotype. But if you've got any business or entrepreneurial abilities, then I think now you can really bring them out into the open, and you can actually structure them. And maybe you can structure other people's ideas. So if other people have got ideas which in themselves are a bit vague and chaotic, you're just the person to sort of listen to them, be critical, but in a constructive sense, and then you can really turn them into something quite wonderful. Though one other thing, Capricorn, don't feel that you have to do everything on your own, and don't be too negative about other people, because recently there's been a lot of planets in Aries, and from a Capricorn perspective, Aries is quite a low profile sign, and everything is now moving out of Aries and into Taurus. And so you may still be used to that low profile way of seeing things, and you perhaps have taken the start, almost got used to not expecting much from other people. But today, I think it's important to be open-minded and to accept that there are one or two people who've really got something to offer, and you need to give people a chance. That doesn't mean to say that you should just be naive and just give people a chance without asking any questions. But there are a couple of people who I really think could be good for you. Yeah, if you allow them to express themselves. I'm saying that because the moon is conjunct Jupiter, And, the moon is ruler of Cancer, which is your opposite sign. So with moon conjunct Jupiter, I just feel that there's someone out there that you can really benefit from. And that benefit, okay, may be material, but when I was, I think, talking about your sign yesterday, when I was talking about Capricorn yesterday, I think I ended with the concept of enjoying yourself. It's important to enjoy yourself. And I say the same thing. It is important to enjoy yourself. And it may be that the key to enjoying yourself today is actually enjoying yourself with another person, provided, of course, that they are the right person. Aquarius. Aquarians are in, I suppose, quite a introspective mood at the moment. I don't think Aquarians really want to sort of go out and draw attention to themselves. They know what they want, they know how they want to be, and I think that you probably take the view that you just don't need too much social interaction. And I don't think that you should apologize for that. I think that today is probably a day for grounding yourself and for considering what you can do. There are things you can do that you're getting it together, but you're not all the way there. There is a lot of work to be done. Maybe it's a question of studying. And in that case, you need the space and the time to do it. And by withdrawing a little bit from the world, I think that you will give yourself the best possible chance of making sense of whatever you're trying to make sense of. And today, or perhaps last night, depends on your time zone, there was this new moon in Taurus. And this new moon in Taurus, from your view, is a very grounding new moon. And this new moon might be a new beginning in terms of how you are seeing your home and your domestic environment, what kind of relationship you want to have to your home, and of course to your family as well. And so perhaps you need to think about your family and how you relate to your family and who you are communicating with. Are there members of your family who you haven't been in touch with for a long time? Perhaps they're close members of your family, but you still haven't been in touch with them for a long time. Well, now with this new moon might be a chance to start something new. Call someone after a couple of years and just see what happens. And Aquarius, I understand that you may regard yourself as being someone who is original and cutting edge, and certainly doesn't like to regard themselves as being staid and boring. But just don't forget, Aquarius is a fixed sign, and your grounding, however boring that might seem, grounding is just really important today. Especially as there are, remember, Aquarius is an air sign, and there are no planets in air, except unless you count Pluto in the South Node. Pluto's going to, that's a generational sign, but there are no traditional planets in air. It's not a time for exploring ideas, exploring stuff that's new. It's a time for really grounding yourself, and that's what's important. But now I'm going to contradict myself. No, there are no planets in air today, unless you're in the Americas, because when does it happen? The moon goes into Gemini. I wrote it down. Yeah, 7:20 p.m. In New York. The moon goes into Gemini, and that's 4:20 p.m. in Los Angeles. And so, in fact, the moon is actually going into an air sign if you're in the Americas late in the day. So, Aquarius, I'm going to moderate what I've just said for American Aquarians. That towards the end of the day, as the moon goes into Gemini, you possibly are going to lose some of your fixity, some of your rigidness, and I think that you can afford to be a little bit more of an extrovert. You can start to do a bit of exploring, but late in the day. As I said, it's after 4:20 p.m. in Los Angeles. But as the day is closing down, I mean, what is there left in the day to do? But perhaps you've been focusing on one thing, and you now start to have to focus on two things. And you thought you had a fixed idea, but now with the moon moving into Gemini, you start to see, there's an alternative. And it wasn't quite as obvious as you thought it was. And that sets you thinking. And those thoughts could lead you in many different directions. But that's something that really we can discuss tomorrow, because the moon is just going into Gemini, and for the rest of the world, it's not until tomorrow that we really start to experience moon in Gemini. And Aquarians, I think, tomorrow, as the moon moves into Gemini, can perhaps afford to be a little more adventurous. Pisces. Today you probably have quite a lot to say, or at least you think you've got quite a lot to say, but maybe you should be careful what you say, because I think there is some danger of you saying the wrong thing. And I think that Pisces, the problem might be is that you're picking up on a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on, a lot of information to process, and there is a danger that you draw the wrong conclusion, or you find yourself saying something and then suddenly you realize that people are listening, and you find that you may have to support what you've just said, and you realize you can't support what you said, and then you have to backtrack. So be careful there. Now, that doesn't mean to say you should be silent today. I don't think Pisceans are going to want to be silent today, or even are going to be able to be silent today. But if you are talking about things, just keep it simple, or stick to subjects that you are really a complete expert on. If you move outside your area of expertise, then I think that there is a danger that you could embarrass yourself. And I would, at the same time, not spend too much time listening to other people. Other people have some very strange ideas right now. Some of them actually could be quite disturbing and puzzling, and you might not be able to make sense of them, but you might wonder whether this person whether the person you're listening to is serious, or whether they can be trusted, and it's just going to be very confusing. And so, avoid listening to other people, and just instead be open-minded. There is a new moon today in Taurus, and I think that, it could have been last night, depending on your time zone. But this new moon should be grounding. Remember, it's in Taurus. Taurus is an earth sign. It's about understanding the facts and the absolute basics of things, and the facts of the matter are completely self-evident. They're really, It all starts with material facts, actually what you can see in front of you. Start with that. Start with what you can see. Don't, as I said, don't believe what people say. But if someone tells you something, but something is the case, then you don't have to believe them and you don't have to not believe them. What you can do is find out for yourself. And it may be that you can find out for yourself by actually going to a place. So if someone says that, I don't know, some location is like this, did you see this on this particular road? For example, you can actually go there and look for yourself. So just don't take what people say at face value, and just be ready to just confirm things. And that's possibly what you should spend today doing, confirming. Confirming may be hard work. It may even require a bit of travel. It needn't be a lot of travel. Maybe you can just walk down a road and see for yourself, and not get involved in speculative thinking. Because once you've understood what the true facts are, then you will be in a good position to do things which have a real chance of being successful, because they're grounded on something which is something which is real, rather than just plain fiction. And finally, with this new moon in Taurus, I do occasionally mention neighbours, and I think neighbours are important. We often forget neighbours, the community we live in, the people we see every day, but we don't talk to them. You know, who is the woman walking her dog? She always walks her dog. In fact, I can see people walking a dog right now, almost. But who is that person? I see, they are a neighbour, I suppose. And with the new moon in Taurus, I think it is a time for trying to understand your neighbours better. Doesn't mean to say you necessarily have to talk to them, but it probably might be best to talk to them. But yeah, try to understand them. Try to understand how your immediate community fits together. It might not seem important right now, but it could be important at a later stage. And that's it with the 12 signs. And I am now going to look at the day from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And that is a reminder that you do not have to watch the I Ching segment of this video. If you don't want to watch it, because my I Ching segment only relates to people who are watching that segment. My forecast doesn't apply to people who don't watch it. So you can skip. I think the section after the I Ching is the Starliner, so you can go and skip the I Ching if you want to. So the first hexagram I threw was hexagram 37, which is the family. That's quite a nice hexagram to have with this new moon in Taurus. Taurus is about stability. It's about knowing our place in things, and that's really important with the family, because when we see the family in terms of I Ching, we have to remember that the I Ching is a Confucian oracle. From the perspective of Confucian society, everything should have its order. There is a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in families. There's a hierarchy in society. The basis of a well-functioning society is a well-functioning family. You attack the family, you attack society, and that would be a Confucian perspective. And what it's what the suggestion is, because we do have one moving line here, we have the second line from the bottom moving, and it's telling us that it is not a time to be a wild individual. It's not a time for doing things that we want to do. It's a time for understanding our duty. We should arguably stay where we are. I know we might have these big ideas. We'd like to visit somewhere. We'd like to do something exciting, but no, we have a duty to do, and there are things we're supposed to be doing within the hierarchy, in our family, in our home. It may be something else. It may be connected if you have a job. It may be that you have a place in the hierarchy of a company, and you have to just do what is expected of you. It's not a time for being original, or for telling people about your wonderful ideas. Just stick to what you're supposed to be doing. And yes, I understand that is boring, but this is just a hexagram for today, and tomorrow is going to be something else. But so if you stick to what you're supposed to be doing, then that is the right thing to do. And going outside the home, if you don't have to go outside the home, is probably a bad idea, because you would potentially be neglecting your obligations. And this hexagram, the family, does transition to hexagram 9, which is the taming power of the small. And it's a similar picture. It's not a time for having big ambitions. We just need to focus on what we can do, and we mustn't be too obsessive about self-control. It's not like self-control as in it reaching a point where it actually hurts, but we just have to, I think, just have a quiet day and do our duty and not expect immediate results. It's not that kind of day. And I think that is in accord with this idea of the new moon in Taurus. The new moon is just the beginning of something. It's not the action itself. Things happen and start in the darkness. And if we are very active during a time of a new moon, it's really inappropriate. And I think this is perhaps reflected by this hexagram 9, the taming power of the small. Don't have big ambitions. It's not a time for telling the world what's on your mind. Just do what's in front of you and do your duty, and then you will be doing the right thing. And having done the I Ching, I want to look at rockets. So yesterday, I think it was Boeing tried to launch a Starliner. Is it called a Starliner at Cape Canaveral? I think it was due to be launched at 10:34 p.m, but the launch was cancelled because something was wrong. And I think there were 2 astronauts aboard, which is a bit disturbing. So the actual time at which the Starliner was cancelled, I think, was at 8:40 p.m. By the way, I'm not going to be spending a long time on this, but it was really just before the new moon, and this is perhaps a reminder that ideally we shouldn't be starting new projects just before the new moon. It's the end of the cycle. So really, we should wait until after the new moon, surely. But anyway, they went ahead. They want to do it. They tried to launch this thing before the new moon, and fortunately, I suppose, they realised there was a problem and they cancelled. And you can perhaps see the problem here. Remember, Jupiter is moving on to Algol. And at the time of the cancellation, I'm not sure whether this was the precise timing. I mean, this was when it was announced. We had 26 Scorpio rising, and so that would mean that Jupiter conjunct Algol was on the 7th house cusp. We had Uranus conjunct Algol. Well, no, Uranus is not conjunct Algol, but Uranus was pretty close to the 7th, and Jupiter was on the 7th. So that looks potentially a bit grim if they had decided to launch, and the moon is making a square to Pluto. So it looks to me as if they did the right thing, cancelling the launch. So that's what might have happened if they had a launch, but they didn't launch, and that's good. Now they are planning on another launch, supposedly later in the week. I read one source said that they were planning on the weekend. Another source said Friday. I read it somewhere at 9 p.m. on Friday. I'm not sure when they were planning on launching, but I'm a bit bothered by all of this because here's 9 p.m. on Friday, for example. Let's say they want to launch their rocket on 9 p.m. on Friday. What about this time? Well, clearly you don't want to launch when the moon is void of course. That's one problem. And another problem is the fact that Mars is semi-square Uranus at the end of the week. Mars is semi-square Uranus. Mars-Uranus connections are about accidents, things blowing up. Now, it's likely if they were to launch this when Mars was semi-square Uranus that it would be fine, nothing would happen. But astrology is, it's all part of the preparations. Would you really want to look? Would you really, if you were an astronaut, would you want to fly on be in a rocket which was being launched at the exact time of Mars semi-square Uranus? I don't think so. And I certainly hope they don't launch on Friday, because particularly at 9 o'clock. Well, okay, a bit earlier would be even worse, but you do have Mars semi-square Uranus, and that would be a bad idea to launch Friday or even Saturday, I think. So I would hope they sort of wait until next week. Another thing, of course, is that Jupiter is conjunct Algol. And, I've talked about Jupiter conjunct Algol as suggesting you may be able to benefit from other people's misfortune. But Jupiter is a planet that kind of actualizes what it touches. And so to have a big project when Jupiter is conjunct Algol, it actualizes what it touches. And Algol is the head of a demon. It's a very malefic fixed star. And so that would not be a good omen. So looking at this Starliner and when they launch it, I certainly hope they don't launch it on Friday. I think they should wait until next week. They should wait until the Mars-Uranus semi-square has broken up. And hopefully things will be fine. Now I want to go back to Harry, and I was asked this question in the comments about Harry's North Node. And let me show you what I mean with Prince Harry and his North Node. So Harry's North Node is at 2938 Taurus, and it was pointed out to me that the North Node is on the sort of the Weeping Sisters, and at the beginning of this beginning of this video, I mentioned the Weeping Sisters. So let's just go back to this North Node on the Weeping Sisters. Now, this book, The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology, does not have an interpretation for North Node on Alcyon. So remember, and indeed it's connected with the Pleiades, and the Pleiades are they are the 7 weeping sisters, and you can it gives some of the definitions. For example, Pleiades with moon: injuries to the face, sickness, misfortune, wounds, stabs, disgrace, imprisonment, blindness, defective sight, especially if in the ascendant or one of the other angles, may be cross-eyed, colourblind, or the eyes may be affected by some growth. With Mercury, many disappointments, loss of possessions, much loss from legal affairs, business failure, trouble through children. So those are some ideas about this fixed star on which Harry's North Node is on. But, what does that mean? One has to ask, what does the North Node mean? The North Node can be about karma. I think I can't remember what was the name of the book. I think it was it Schulman? He wrote this book on the nodes in the 70s or 80s, which it was very popular at the time. I think he wrote 2 books on the nodes, and that helped popularize the idea that nodes are about karma. And the North Node is where you're going to, South Node is where you're coming from, and I suppose you could say, well, North Node on Taurus, it's about Harry trying to stabilize himself, and he should move away from Scorpio. And I think that with Harry, we can see that he is just a little bit too Scorpio. There seems to be a vengeful streak, getting over emotional, and particularly as he's got Saturn in Saturn conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. I mean, okay, it's massively wide. I mean, it's over half a sign away, but Saturn and South Node are in the same sign, and so perhaps that's what he needs to do. North Node, he needs to ground himself. I think last year when I was talking about Harry's chart and what he should be doing, I thought he should just be a farmer. Agriculture would work very well for Harry. He should forget all this sort of California stuff. Just be a farmer. Okay, he'd like someone suggested, maybe you can be a farmer in Africa, whatever. He seems to like Africa, but just farming and agriculture. Maybe he should just go to agricultural college now and just farm for the rest of his life. His father was into farming, so that's a way of looking at North Node in Taurus in the 4th house. But there is this sense of sorrow with his North Node, what we get from this fixed star. This may be his destiny, to have a sorrow and to be in a sense where there is a great sense of tragedy around him. Though, do we actually need to think in terms of fixed stars to understand what his node is actually about? And the issue we have here is that it's his Mars and his Saturn. So Harry has got the nodal axis exactly on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so that tells us everything we need to know, perhaps, about the node. Mars, it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So you could say that from a karmic perspective, part of what is down here on this planet for is to negotiate tragedy, to take a tragedy, I suppose the death of his mother, and to create real stability out of it and to move beyond it. That might be one way of looking at it. But it's a treacherous path, and he's been lured into sort of his... California is not North Node. His life in California is absolutely not North Node conjunct Taurus on the IC. That is completely ungrounded. So it's a very difficult thing for him to negotiate. Now, how do we know that the North Node is about tragedy? Well, okay, it's on the Mars-Saturn conjunction, but there's something else that we can see in his chart. But before I say that, we should remember also that from a German perspective, the North Node is about one's contacts, who one is contacted, who one is around. And it seems that he is around people who are who are hurt. Now, that could be his mother and the whole funereal environment of his mother's funeral and his mother's death. We get a hint of this if we go to Alfred Witter's Rules for Planetary Pictures, when we see what it says about Mars conjunct Saturn. And so Mars conjunct Saturn would be, it says, node, to be taken ill, cases of death, funerals, interruption of connections, quarrels, big quarrels with Harry. So his whole connections with other people are quarrelsome. That's North Node on the Mars-Saturn conjunction. But Mars and Saturn is also about people who are wounded, and this whole Invictus Games thing. So my understanding of Invictus Games, so you have veterans, British veterans, American veterans, up from other nations, who have been badly wounded, have been maimed as a result of the wars. Big focus on the war in Afghanistan. And so you could say that with Harry, with his North Node on the Mars-Saturn, his nodal axis on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, it's firstly associations with people who are wounded in war. And I think we can see that in a fortunate sense with the Invictus Games. We could also see it as being his karma to be associating with these kinds of people, to be involved with the Invictus Games. So the Invictus Games actually fits North Node on the Mars-Saturn conjunction really well. But as I understand it, Meghan isn't helping, is she? This Invictus Games thing, his dramas have become the news. And so I think in some respects, this undermining of his connection with the Invictus Games, and it's all, in Meghan's views, and him coming in with the wrong kind of publicity, it's kind of really goes against his karmic inheritance and what he should be doing. I think there is a real problem there. But to illustrate why the North Node on a Mars-Saturn conjunction really is working, it would be useful to consider the directions. So there's Harry's chart. There is his North Node on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and so what I wanted to do was I wanted to look at his directions there. So I wanted to look at Harry's direction, his solar arc directions for that. So let's do the solar arc directions for his mother's death. Let's look at that. Because we would expect to see something, wouldn't we, if this was really important. So if we do the solar arc direction to his mother's death, his mother died on August the 30th, well, 30th, 31st, depends on whether you adjust for time zones. So let's just do that. So there are the solar arc directions, and let's now just connect those with Harry's chart. And So there is, so you can see that Harry's, there's Harry's chart, and you can see Harry's midheaven. So Harry's midheaven is at 17 Scorpio. So if you were looking at Harry's chart without any tables, without any computer programs, you're just looking at Harry's chart. I don't know, maybe you're looking at Harry's chart in, I don't know, 1995, a couple of years before his mother's death. And you look at his chart and you say, well, he has got his midheaven at 17 Scorpio. And with solar arc directions, you really look at the midheaven is really important. And the midheaven, of course, is the mother in astrology. So midheaven is at 17 Scorpio. And we see that his north node is at 29 Scorpio. So we're thinking, okay, that means that when he's about 12 and a half, something like that, we would expect something to happen of the nature of the south node on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. That's what we would expect. And so the solar arc directed midheaven, when his mother died, was at 2943 Scorpio. So the solar arc directed midheaven was exactly on his south node, and the solar arc directed midheaven was exactly on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so that's it. So that solar arc directed midheaven, the mother on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, mother dying, that is really straightforward. And I think that that is a really good example of solar arc directions at work. And so if you're using astrology to make forecasts, you know, it's easy to use transits. I mean, transits have become really popular, but you know, 100 before 100 years ago, well, maybe by then, but transits are very much connected with the modern era. And I don't think transits give us the whole picture. And, you know, in a previous, historically, people used primary directions. Solar arc directions were used to some extent, but primary directions were the main thing. But I do think, using using solar arc direction is something we should do. And they're actually relatively easy because you're just moving every planet 1 degree, 1 degree equals 1 year. And you can just see with Harry, just by eye, you could have almost predicted that his mother was going to die. Well, certainly with hindsight, but you can see his mother's death by eye at around the age of 12, 13, and that is indeed what happened. And with Harry, because we have an exact time of birth, we can certainly say that the midheaven was on his south node, which was on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. Look also at Neptune. Solar arc-directed Neptune was at 1121 Capricorn, which was exactly on his ascendant. So solar arc directions are telling us so much without much effort. And I was thinking about Harry, and I wanted to use Harry as an example to introduce you to the concept, if you're not aware of his concept before, is that there is this thing in astrology called converse transits. Now, what a converse transit is you go the other way. So you think that if you want to know what your transits are, today, you look at the ephemeris. Let's say, I don't know, I'm 62 years old. I'm about to be 62 years old. I'm 62 on May the 30th. So I would look at today, and that was, okay, if I'm looking at my transits on my birthday, May the 30th of this year when I'm 62, and I would look at today, and that would be my transits when I'm 62. But I can also look at my transits for 62 years before I was born. So if I was born on May the 30th, 1962, and I want to know what's happening on May the 30th, 2024, I would actually look at the positions of the planets on May the 30th, 1900. See, if you get the logic, but time goes in both ways. So if we look at Harry, we look at Harry's solar return. So we look at Harry's solar return for 1996, which is his birthday previous to his mother dying. But we could also go the other way. So Harry he just turned 13. So his mother died that was 1997. So he was about to turn 13. So you could actually look at Harry's solar return for 12 years before he was born. So you would look at his solar return at 1972, if I got that right. So Harry was 13. Harry's 13th birthday was September 1997, and by that time his mother was already dead. So one would look at his solar return for 1972. And so I haven't looked at this chart before. So if we look at Prince Harry's chart, there's his natal chart. And if we want to know what's happening to him in the year in which his mother died, one would take a solar return, and one would look at 1972, and that would cover the period. And so there's Harry's chart, and there you see Harry's got the moon in the 10th house in 1972. Remember, Harry wasn't born in 1972, but we're just going backwards. And so you can see that the moon is in the 10th house, relating to the mother, and the moon is opposition Saturn, and there's an exact Mars-Saturn square, and Mars is square his moon. And so that solar return set for 1972 does fit it very well. I'm actually quite relieved because I'd accidentally set up the wrong solar return. I was preparing to show you the solar return for 1971, and I just realized that was the wrong solar return to look at, because in fact it was just before his 13th birthday that he died. So his mother died just before his 13th birthday. So we would look at his solar return for 12 years before he was born, and that would cover him right through until he was 13. So 12 years before he was born, September the 15th, 1972. So I hadn't actually looked at this chart. So I'm kind of quite relieved that this chart has shown my case so well. That look at this: Sun is exactly square the moon. Mars is Mars semi-square. Mars square Saturn. That is a really incredibly bad solar return chart, which shows his mother's death really very clearly. And I just quickly want to finish by looking at Diana's chart using the same approach. So here is, but not with solar returns. So here is Diana's chart, and I've got Diana's chart somewhere. So what we're going to do with Diana, so here's Diana. So she was born July the 1st, 1961. And so she died, or had her accident, on August the 31st. And so it was, the accident happened at 13,000 and something days after she was born. So we take that exact period of time that she was 30, she just turned 36, and we take that period of time, we take it backwards. And if we take that exact period of time and we take it backwards, we get to we get to a date of we get to a date of May the 2nd. We go all the way back to May the 2nd, May the 2nd, 1925. And here we are. This is the precise time of her accident, but we've taken it backwards. So we take the number of years that elapse between her and the tunnel, and we take that and we subtract it from her birthday. And so we come to May the 2nd, 1925 at 4:07 p.m. and I've set it for Sandringham, where she was born. And it's good. I mean, I'd say it's good because this chart seems to fit what happened pretty well. So there's Mars exactly on the midheaven in 1925. Uranus is pretty close to the descendant, and so there is there's that Mars, there's the Mars and the Uranus. So there's a Mars-Uranus square, and Mars-Uranus square, classic signature of an accident. And on May the 2nd, 1925, there was a Sun-Saturn opposition. So there is the Sun-Saturn opposition. The Sun was at 11:41 Taurus and Saturn was at 10:57 Scorpio, and that Sun-Saturn opposition was fairly close to the midpoint between Mars and Uranus. I mean, not exact, but I think good enough. Let me just look at the 90-degree dial. So there is, let's find Sun and Saturn. So there is, remember a 90-degree dial shows conjunctions, oppositions, and squares as conjunctions. There's the Sun-Saturn opposition, you can see, and it's pretty close to Mars and Uranus. Not exactly, but I think going back to the chart, I think that's good enough. So I think that really does demonstrate how events happening before we are born, in fact, in many cases, well before we are born, can actually have an impact on what is happening to us in the here and now. And as far as transits are concerned, I find this a little bit creepy. I sort of felt a bit of a shiver when I saw this. So here's Diana's chart in the middle, and Diana has her North Node at 28 degrees 10 minutes Leo. Now, North Node is the royal star. Sorry, 28 degrees 10 degrees minutes. 28 degrees 10 minutes Leo is conjunct Regulus. So she's got the North Node conjunct Regulus. So in a way, she was destined to marry a prince, and I think that she did want to marry. I think as a child she wanted to marry Prince. You know, she was born in Sandringham, which has a sort of royal connections. So as a child, she had this feeling with the moon conjunct, with the North Node on Regulus. But where was the moon on May the 2nd, 1925, if we take the time of the accident, we move it backwards, the moon at that time was at 28 degrees 12 minutes Leo, and her North Node is at 28 degrees 10 Leo. So at that point, at that moment, almost, when the North Node when the moon exactly crossed her North Node in 1925, 36 years before she was born. Remember, time is always going backwards as well as forwards. That's when she died, and I suppose that was a moment when she, in some ways, that's when her life was realized. That's when it was all over, when she'd achieved her destiny for her particular life. That's maybe when she became the Queen of Hearts. That's what they said, wasn't it? When I remember when people were talking about the funeral, all that run up to the funeral, the Queen of Hearts. And yes, in 1925, on May the 2nd, 1925, the transiting moon was exactly conjunct her north node. Anyway, I hope you found that of some interest. Sorry to go on about Harry and Diana again, but I think I've said something which perhaps hasn't been said, and I think that's food for thought about how we understand time, because time, we always think about time going forward, but maybe it goes backwards as well. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, I would of course be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.